Florida's first coast. A beautiful place to live. We're raising our kids, we're going to work, we're building our lives here. But there is one thing we can't control, and it's out of our hands. The one threat that comes every single year. Hurricane season. And the only thing we can do is prepare for it.
This is a First Coast News special presentation from the First Coast's most accurate weather team, certified by Weather Rate. Hurricane Ready 2022, 40 years of forecasting. Sponsored by AC Designs, Heating and Air Conditioning, your home comfort experts. Rhino Shield, engineered to outlast paint. And by Universal Roof and Contracting. Experience the difference.
I'm Lauren Rautenkranz. My family and I are lucky enough to call this place home. And what's really cool is that I work with some people that I get to call family too. Tim Deegan is one of those very special people. And you know, he's been around for quite some time. So for the next half an hour, I get to sit down with him and pick his brain about 40 years of forecasting along the First Coast. So here we are.
Here we are.
Hurricane season 2020.
2022. Wow.
Our 7th season together.
And yet, it really doesn't tell your story. Because to me, the fact that you experienced Matthew and then Irma, I mean, seriously, when we take a look back briefly at our history, you have 20 years of hurricane experience, seriously, just from Matthew and Irma.
So that would mean you have about 80 because you're heading into your 41st season.
Wow. Yeah, I better go take a nap.
But I mean, you've been here through a whole lot, you know, just with your experience. But obviously the First Coast has been through a whole lot more before that as well.
There is, and I think some people are kind of surprised about that come elsewhere, and they hear that we're not hit by hurricanes. And of course, we are. We are in a much better place than other areas of Florida, but we certainly deal with them. And of course, Dora is the marker, 1964. What I've learned is, because of course we call the First Coast Brunswick all the way down to Flagler, that I like to go back about 130 years. So the 1880s, 1890s, Brunswick, 2 major hurricanes, 2 Cat 3s. One hits Brunswick and goes to Savannah. One's hit Brunswick and goes to Patterson. Goes right by Jacksonville, but still, that's our family.
Right.
You know, Southeast Georgia, Northeast Florida. And then we get to the 20s, and one of the classic, I think, type of hurricanes where South Florida gets hit worse. 1926 hits Jupiter as a Category 2, hits us, but barely as a 1. And then all kind of hurricanes over South Florida and the Panhandle. But then we go all the way to the 40s. 3 hurricanes, 44, 49, 50, all either hit South Florida or Southwest Florida first, hit us as a Category 1, but again, not as strong. Then we go all the way to 1960, Donna, which was, I think, the longest landfalling hurricane in East Coast history. We get hit, but probably less significantly than anybody else on the East Coast.
Right.
And then although 64, which we're going to focus on Dora, because it's our only direct hit, but just before Dora, we had Cleo, hit South Florida in a big way, and then comes Dora, and then of course, Dora's our big one.
If you were to be in an elevator with someone, what would be like your elevator speech of Jacksonville's hurricane history?
We are impacted by hurricanes as much as any other person in Florida or southeastern Georgia. The good news for us is very seldom do we get the eye. So we have to watch it, but very often we're caring more about others. What I say is it literally is geography. You know, we're at 30 degrees north, so at 30 degrees north, most hurricanes by that point, if they're at 30 degrees, they're headed from south to north, which means for us at the very least, it's paralleling the coastline. And because on the East Coast, we're as far to the west as Pittsburgh, it's more likely that once the hurricane makes the turn, it's going to pass just off to our east. But than what happens when they swing back west like Dora did.
I was going to say, the exception being Dora, who just kind of took that straight line and just kept on going, barreled right into Jacksonville. So some people might say, why did that happen with Dora, and why hasn't that happened since, maybe?
And I would say, when people see us covering a hurricane, like let's say between Puerto Rico and south of Bermuda, and most forecasts indicate it's going to make the turn 1,000 miles east of us, and folks say, why are y'all spending so much time with it? Well, although yes, computer models are so much better, but we do have the memory of the Doras that looks like they're making the turn and then they come back west, which is especially why, as you know, with the Matthews, when we think it's going to pass 100 miles, 50 miles, if we're off by 50 or 100 miles, especially because we're trying to make decisions 3 to 5 days before it's here, that's nothing.
Right. Miles matter, and I mean like 5 to 10 miles can matter, especially in Matthew's case when it's just about 30 miles off the coast. I mean, that's a difference of hurricane force winds versus tropical storm force winds.
Miles matter. You nail it. You know, I was looking back at Matthew and the official summary of Matthew, and it showed how, and even if you're new to the area, I think people can picture the Florida coast and how the Cape Canaveral just barely sticks out. Well, that allowed them, if you want to put it that way, to just catch the northwest eye wall, and they got gusts to what, 125 miles per hour? Whereas especially up here in northeast Florida, we sort of sit in, and so even if a hurricane is moving due north, in many ways, now we're farther west of it than folks like the Cape.
There have been a lot of inland impacts as well with our area in particular.
Well, you know, I think we can learn from every single hurricane or even tropical storm. You know, I think back to Elena, 1985. For those who weren't around then, it was primarily a Gulf Coast hurricane. Now, for people in Tampa and the Panhandle, they remember it because it was around Labor Day. It was wobbling. There were no steering currents. The Panhandle was initially evacuated. Then it looked like it was going to Tampa. They were evacuated. Then it finally did go back to the Panhandle. Meanwhile, the whole time it's in the Gulf, we're being pounded with rain in Jacksonville, and actually out to our Live Oak in Lake City, they had some flooding. So to me, that was a great lesson of the big concern was Gulf Coast, and yet we had flooding way inland around the Suwannee County area.
We'll take Irma, for example. It made landfall in southwest Florida, and we saw some of the biggest. I mean, the headlines were in Jacksonville with record flooding and historic flooding, and you saw those, really captivating headlines. And so a lot of people, again, wondered why it was so bad afterwards.
Right, because 50 years from now, people will say, Irma had made a direct hit in San Marco or Marco Island as a Cat 4, so that wasn't a Jacksonville big deal. And yet, it was the biggest deal we've had since Dora. Now, I do think what folks who are new to the area need to remember is that the St. Johns River, in many ways, as you know, is like a long inlet. In other words, the drop is so slow, it really is as much impacted by tidal as it is by rain. Therefore, I have told people the St. Johns River is one of the few rivers where unless there's a biblical rain event, it's not going to flood because of rain.
Right.
But because it can fill up like an inlet, if you have the combination of the two, Katie barred the door, and that's what happened. We had, I was looking at a summary just recently, and so the official numbers for history are that northeast Florida had basically a 2 to 4 foot storm surge. However, the whole watershed of the St. Johns had 10 to 20 inches.
Yep.
And thus that literally added another 2 feet, and that got us to a 5 to 6 foot surge. And thus, again, for those who weren't here, Irma was a much bigger deal on the St. Johns River than the beaches, whereas Matthew was a big deal, of course, on the beaches.
What would happen if we did get a big one again?
I think for anybody who was here in Matthew and Irma, as bad as it was, and to be clear, Matthew was really bad, especially for folks in St. John's and Flagler and along the Intercoastal. And Irma was really bad, especially for folks along the St. John's. Neither one of those were even close to direct hits. In fact, Lauren, I would say that yes, Dora was a direct hit, but it was not our worst case scenario. There were very few people that lived between St. Augustine and Jacksonville Beach. And yet the front right quadrant, which for 99.9% of hurricanes, that's the worst, the eye of Dora hit 6 miles north of St. Augustine. So although it may not happen for another 500 years, or it could happen this year, we don't know, I would say the worst case scenario is let's not even take it to the movies. Let's not even say Cat 5. Let's say it's a Cat 3/4, and it makes landfall on Ponte Vedra Beach, and it moves at 5 miles per hour and goes over Mandarin in northern St. Johns County, and we'd probably have a 12 to 14 foot storm surge, not a 6 like Irma. We'd probably have 10 to 20 inches of rain. Everybody from northern St. Johns County through Duval, northern Clay County, that's now probably 1.3 million people would experience winds of over one. I mean, I'm getting chills even talking about it. Gusts of over 100 miles per hour. So let's hope it doesn't happen. Let's prepare for it. But at the very least, whether you were back here in 64 with Dora or you were here with Matthew and Irma, we haven't had anything near the worst case scenario.
Determine your risk at the beginning of every hurricane season, or perhaps you're just new to hurricanes. Think about what your home is susceptible to. Remembering, wind and rain can be felt hundreds of miles inland. These hurricanes aren't just river or coastal situations. They can impact all of us. But for the easiest way to determine your risk, just download the First Coast News app, go to the Hurricane Central page. We've got everything you need to know right there.
Coming up,
Can you even think of a hurricane season where you were like, oh, this year's not going to be that bad?
when Hurricane Ready 2022 40 Years of Forecasting returns.
We are obviously at the Casa Marina. It's
Yes.
iconic Jack's Beach spot.
Beautiful.
And they had a really cool story with Matthew where, you know, they have weddings here almost every weekend, especially during hurricane season, right? And this poor bride had a wedding the weekend, right, as Matthew is going by. But you know what I thought was really cool? It's not the fact that the wedding went on. It's just the fact that it takes a village, and the resiliency of our First Coast. They got this wedding on. They got power back at 1 p.m. on that Saturday.
Pretty amazing.
Bridges were closed.
And to be clear, they were responsible. They shut down. The Casa Marina got their people out of harm's way. But once the storm was gone, they probably wanted to get back to their own homes, but they came out here and love was brought together once again at the Casa Marina.
So transitioning to the present, our environment now, you know, a little bit different in a sense that we might have a La Nina period this year. In the past, I mean, we've talked about how you can get storms La Nina, El Nino, neutral. Warmer waters, less wind shear, all of the above. What would you say, you know, you're looking at as far as those variables go this season?
So as a reminder, for those who are new to the area or you sort of get confused, for us, La Nina's bad.
Right.
Because La Nina is good for hurricanes.
Yes.
Less shear, more hurricanes.
Right.
El Nino is good for us because it's bad for hurricanes.
Right.
El Nino means
More
more
wind
shear.
shear.
So it's tough this year because even the world's experts, they're saying La Nina, but they're only giving us about a 53% chance. So it's almost a coin toss, right? And I think the point that you're getting to is, it is interesting, but I think really at some point, hopefully, science can take us to the next point. And whether science thinks it's going to be a La Nina or a El Nino year, or it's going to be an active or an inactive year, what really matters to us is how many of those will make landfall. We've seen active years, meaning there's a lot in the ocean, but very few come to land. We've seen inactive years where 1 or 2 come to land, Alicia, Andrew, Hugo, but that's a decade's worth of a catastrophic storm, right? So hopefully someday, it hasn't happened yet, someday that in those outlooks, then we can say, okay, but what does that mean for a particular area? We're not really there. So it's interesting, but so to me, we say now what we've said for 41 years, and that is that, you know, why not prepare? Like, what if there's just one, but what if it just happens to hit you?
I mean, can you even think of a hurricane season where you were like, oh, this year's not going to be that bad?
No.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because every year you never really know where they're going to go.
You don't. And all it takes is one. Yeah.
Develop an evacuation plan. Whether you live in an evacuation zone, figure that out, flood-prone area or mobile home, you need to have an idea of where you'd go, or if it would be safest to stay home and stay off the roads. And remember, you don't have to go hundreds of miles. You may just be able to stay with a friend, a family member in a more safe area. And always account for the pets. For all the evacuation zone information, the flood-prone areas, download the First Coast News app, go to the Hurricane Central page. We've got it all for you right there.
After the break,
Dora was a direct hit, but it was not our worst case scenario.
Hurricane Ready 2022, 40 years of forecasting. We'll be right back.
Past, present, but then the future. So looking ahead through the 2022 season, with what we know, what can we expect? Excluding all the numbers, because there are going to be a lot of numbers thrown out. And as we know, the numbers really don't matter, right? Because it can just take one. So what do you think we're going to expect?
So I think, like you said, as long as everybody realizes all it takes is one, I think the easiest thing to say is that, especially for anyone who's been here for 20 or 40 or 60 years, compared to what used to be average, it's going to be an active season, just because of the warmer ocean.
Every single year, it seems like it's above average.
Right.
We're breaking records, all of the above. So,
and hopefully that it can be active for other people. For instance, last year was a terrible year for Louisiana.
Yep.
Wasn't too bad for Florida, especially not Northeast Florida.
And that gets back to the point where we're doing our job, we promise, but we really do want people to pay attention and be prepared and just kind of tune in and make sure they're educating themselves throughout the season.
Exactly. And what I like about our weather team is, yes, we take it very seriously, our responsibility to have you aware of the possibility of a threatening storm. But we also are there to help you enjoy life.
Right.
And as soon as we can, if we can say, so-and-so storm, yeah, it's out there, but you know what? We don't have to worry about it anymore. We'll be the first ones on the air to tell you that.
Maybe it'll bring you some good swell.
Exactly. So yeah, for surf. In other words, sometimes I think during hurricane season, some folks can get the, I hear no evil, see no evil. But don't think that just because we're coming on the air, for lack of vocabulary, getting on the digits, whatever we say these days, that just because you're about ready to hear from us, it doesn't mean it's bad news. In fact, because we live in an area where more often than not, they miss us than don't, I think more often than not during hurricane season, we're saying, hey, you know what? We have some good news today.
Right.
Whether you're going to shelter in place or hit the road and evacuate, you got to have a disaster kit. I'm talking supplies, so non-perishable food items, water, medication, enough to last for you and your entire family, everybody in the house for at least 3 days, because this isn't just a duration of the storm thing. This is aftermath as well. Think about power outages. So with that in mind, you need a full tank of gas, cash on hand, and ways to charge your devices, your cell phone. Maybe have a solar-powered radio or a crank radio and plenty of batteries for flashlights. It's a lot, I know, but if you download the First Coast News app, click on the Hurricane Central tab, boom, you've got it all right there. Stay safe.
Hurricane Ready 2022, 40 years of forecasting. We'll be right back.
I love that we got the chance to sit down because, like you said, we're always opposite shifts and we're either overlapping by just a few minutes or, we don't really get to see each other. And so being able to sit down and chat and pick your brain has been wonderful.
No, I really do appreciate it. I really do mean it when I say one of the biggest compliments a person can give me is if they ask me a question. Oh my gosh, that's huge. And let's face it, whether this is a busy season or an inactive season, there'll be at least one storm where you and I will probably spend just enough time with each other to where then we'll be glad
to say goodbye.
Perfect.
It's because I love you, Tim.
Perfect.
But...
Bam. That was perfect.
Cut.
Yeah.
Well, now you're ready, right? You've got it all figured out. Why not go ahead and have that plan written down before a hurricane is on your doorstep? Know who issues those evacuation orders for your area. Have your supplies handy and where you would go if you do need to evacuate. And remember, have the documents handy, those important things like your insurance papers, your will, things like that, right where you know where you can get them. Make it easy on yourself this hurricane season. And to make it easy as possible, download the First Coast News app, go to the Hurricane Central tab.
If you're new to the First Coast, welcome home. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Tim just as much as I did. Now, for all you need to know all hurricane season long, pop on over to firstcoastnews.com where you'll find our Hurricane Central page, or you can take everything you need in the palm of your hand on that First Coast News app. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on Good Morning Jacksonville.
This has been a First Coast News special presentation from the First Coast's most accurate weather team, certified by WeatherRate. Hurricane Ready 2022, 40 years of forecasting. Sponsored by AC Designs, Heating and Air Conditioning, your home comfort experts. Rhino Shield, engineered to outlast paint. And by Universal Roof and Contracting, experience the difference.
I love that we got the chance to sit down because, like you said, we're always opposite shifts and we're either overlapping by just a few minutes or, we don't really get to see each other. And so being able to sit down and chat and pick your brain has been wonderful.
No, I really do appreciate it. I really do mean it when I say one of the biggest compliments a person can give me is if they ask me a question. Oh my gosh, that's huge. And let's face it, whether this is a busy season or an inactive season, there'll be at least one storm where you and I will probably spend just enough time with each other to where then we'll be glad
to say goodbye.
Perfect.
It's because I love you, Tim.
Perfect.
But...
Bam. That was perfect.
Cut.
Yeah.
Well, now you're ready, right? You've got it all figured out. Why not go ahead and have that plan written down before a hurricane is on your doorstep? Know who issues those evacuation orders for your area. Have your supplies handy and where you would go if you do need to evacuate. And remember, have the documents handy, those important things like your insurance papers, your will, things like that, right where you know where you can get them. Make it easy on yourself this hurricane season. And to make it easy as possible, download the First Coast News app, go to the Hurricane Central tab.
If you're new to the First Coast, welcome home. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Tim just as much as I did. Now, for all you need to know all hurricane season long, pop on over to firstcoastnews.com where you'll find our Hurricane Central page, or you can take everything you need in the palm of your hand on that First Coast News app. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on Good Morning Jacksonville.
This has been a First Coast News special presentation from the First Coast's most accurate weather team, certified by WeatherRate. Hurricane Ready 2022, 40 years of forecasting. Sponsored by AC Designs, Heating and Air Conditioning, your home comfort experts. Rhino Shield, engineered to outlast paint. And by Universal Roof and Contracting, experience the difference.